want you to know that Pilate was right. It's an odd statement, but Pilate was right. We know Pilate for being wrong. We don't know him for being right. We know him for being wrong. Wrong as anybody could be wrong. We know Pilate as the man who gave the final decision for the death of Jesus. He gave the order, and crucifixion was carried out. He knew Jesus was innocent. Pilate told the crowd he found no guilt in him. He tried to plead with them, saying, "What evil has he done?" His wife told him to have nothing to do with that righteous man. He knew Jesus was innocent, and he tried to release him. But he caved to the demands of the Jews. He gave in to cancel culture. The mob pressured him with a bogus claim that anyone who calls himself a king is opposed to Caesar. So if you release Jesus, you stand with him in opposition to Caesar. And as for us, we have no king but Caesar. It's hard to be any further from the truth. The Jews, who would be all for opposing Caesar, claim Caesar as their king, yet they ask for Barabbas to be released, who had been charged with insurrection, opposition to Caesar. But the Jewish leaders knew where and how to apply the pressure. Threaten someone's political career to get what you want. Pilate was wrong to give in to cancel culture. Pilate was wrong to order the death of the most innocent man there could be. He was wrong to put the Son of God on the cross. We know Pilate for being wrong on that. And really, what a terrible thing to be known for and to go down in history as that man. But Pilate got one thing right. I want you to know Pilate got one thing right. I want to read from John 19, verses 1 through 5. Then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him. And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. They came up to him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out to you so that you may know that I find no guilt in him." So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." Behold the man standing before the crowd. Beaten to a bloody pulp, from head to toe his flesh is in shreds. He has just received the prequel to crucifixion. I want you to hear this from the Expositor's Bible Commentary on the Gospel of Mark. In any case, flogging was no light punishment. The Romans first stripped the victim and tied his hands to a post above his head. The whip, or the flagellum, was made of several pieces of leather with pieces of bone and lead embedded near the ends. 2 men, one on each side of the victim, usually did the flogging. The Jews mercifully limited flogging to a maximum of 40 stripes. The Romans had no such limitation. The following is a medical doctor's description of the physical effects of flogging. The heavy whip is brought down with full force again and again across Jesus' shoulders, back, and legs. At first, the heavy thong is cut through the skin only. Then, as the blows continue, they cut deeper into the subcutaneous tissues, producing first an oozing of blood from the capillaries and veins of the skin, and finally spurting arterial bleeding from vessels in the underlying muscles. Finally, the skin of the back is hanging in long rivets, and the entire area is an unrecognizable mass of torn, bleeding tissue. Mark Moore adds this from his book, The Chronological Life of Christ. So much muscle was left shredded and hanging that the victim's vertebrae were exposed, and sometimes even his intestines. After Jesus is flogged, the physical torture relents a bit and turns to mocking. Thorny branches are twisted and shaped together and pressed down upon Jesus' head for a crown. The soldiers place a purple robe on him and put a rod in his hand for a ruler's staff. They kneel before him and mockingly say, "Hail, King of the Jews!" The text doesn't say, but it's not hard for us to think of other vulgarities they may have said to him. The soldiers spit on him. They hit him in the face. They strike him on the head with a staff. How can Jesus just sit there and take it? How can he let the soldiers have their way? So much he could have said and done through the whole sham of a trial. Oh, what he could have said to the soldiers. You rip my flesh with your whip. You beat me with the rod you've given me to mock my kingship. If you only knew the rod I will one day wield. I will rule the nations with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. I will strike the earth with the rod of my mouth, and the breath of my lips will slay the wicked. He could have said that, but he didn't. If he had addressed the soldiers to make them stop, then what? If he had called down legions of angels, as he said in Gethsemane, then what? The story cannot stop here. There was more to be done. There was more written to be fulfilled. If we stop here, there was no redemption. Behold the man. Pilate was right. Behold the man condemned to death. Jesus was forced to carry his own cross to the place of execution. This was the horizontal beam known as the patibulum. There are different estimates, but 75 pounds seems to be the minimum amount of weight for the patibulum. We know Jesus was unable to carry it all the way, as a man named Simon was forced to carry it for him. After coming to the place known as Golgotha, or Calvary, from the Latin translation, which means the place of the skull, the crossbeam is set down. Jesus is laid down with his arms stretched out on the patibulum, ready to receive the nails. Most likely, the nails would be hammered in just behind the wrist, between the radius and ulna, the two bones of the forearm. Again, from Mark Moore in the Chronological Life of Christ. Such a position of the nail would provide ample support for the body, especially since the feet were also nailed, and often the cross was equipped with a peg or small block of wood on which the victim could sit. But of equal importance to the Romans, a nail through the wrist would sever the median nerve, sending a searing pain through the arms and shoulders of the victim. The patibulum would then be secured to the vertical beam, the stipes, followed by his feet nailed to the stipes. Traditionally, we think of one foot placed upon the other with a nail driven through, but there are other possibilities. One way is that his legs were turned 90 degrees to the side, with each foot nailed through the heel to the front of the stipes. Or each foot may have been nailed to either side of the cross so that his legs would straddle the stipes. The cross is then raised up and set into place, and there is the man on display for all to see. The pain from having to push up from the nails through your feet and pull up from the nails through your wrists. As he raises up for a breath, the open wounds from the scourging on his back slide against the rough-cut beam of the cross. All of that, and he is still mocked by those watching. His time on the cross went on for about 6 hours. Behold the man. Pilate was right. I'd like to share with you from a book entitled Crucifixion by Martin Hengel. In the book, he writes about how crucifixion was used in Roman times and how death on a cross was viewed in the ancient world. From a chapter called Crucifixion as a Barbaric Form of Execution and the Utmost Cruelty, he writes this. He's referring to a crucifixion from Greek history when he says, "We have very few more detailed descriptions, and they come only from Roman times. The passion narratives in the gospel are in fact the most detailed of all. No ancient writer wanted to dwell too long on this cruel procedure. Even in the Roman Empire, where there might be said to be some kind of norm for the course of the execution, it included a flogging beforehand, and the victim often carried the beam to the place of the execution, where he was nailed to it with outstretched arms, raised up and seated on a small wooden peg. The form of execution could vary considerably. Crucifixion was a punishment in which the caprice and sadism of the executioners were given full rein. All attempts to give a perfect description of the crucifixion in archaeological terms are therefore in vain, for there were too many different possibilities for the executioner." At times in the book, Hengel refers to a man named Seneca. Seneca was a Roman statesman and philosopher in the first century. And in the same chapter, one reads this. For Seneca, on the other hand, a life which can be compared with the torments of hanging on the cross, with only a peg to support the body, and in which the only comfort is the outcome of the execution, death, life is no longer worth living. Hengel then quotes Seneca as writing, "Is it worthwhile to weigh down on one's own wound and hang impaled on a gibbet in order to postpone something which is the balm of troubles, the end of punishment?" Hengel then writes, "A lengthy process of dying is no longer worthy of the name of life." There follows a description of the gradual expiry of the victim of crucifixion, which is unique in ancient literature. And he quotes Seneca again. "Can anyone be found who would prefer wasting away in pain, dying limb by limb, or letting out his life drop by drop, rather than expiring once and for all? Can any man be found willing to be fastened to the accursed tree, long, sickly, already deformed, swelling with ugly wheals on shoulders and chest, and drawing the breath of life amid long, drawn-out agony? He would have many excuses for dying even before mounting the cross." Behold the man. Pilate was right. He was so wrong. He had no comprehension of the fullness of time that was wrapped up in those moments as Jesus stood before him. He gave in to the demands of the Jews. He gave the final order to crucify Jesus. But Pilate was right. Behold the man. Pilate did not do that himself, but he was right. Although he was a pagan Gentile, you could classify his words as the shortest sermon ever given. Behold the man. Pilate was right. He was right on that one thing. Behold the man. On those three words, Pilate and Jesus would be in total agreement. Behold the man. In John 12:32, Jesus said, "And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself." And John writes in verse 33 that Jesus said this to show by what kind of death he was going to die. The cross is it. Jesus said the cross is how he would draw people to himself. If that is the case, then behold the man. Behold the man who gave his back to those who strike and his cheeks to those who pull out the beard. and who hid not his face from spitting. Behold the man, whose appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any man, and his form marred beyond human likeness. Behold the man, who was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. Behold the man, who committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. Behold the man, who said while on the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Behold the man, who was pierced for our transgressions, who was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. Behold the man who bore our sins in his body on the tree, that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. Behold the man who knew no sin, who became sin for us, so that we might become the righteousness of God. Behold the man who suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God. Behold the man who prayed, not my will, but yours be done. Behold the man whom the Lord has laid on the iniquity of us all. Behold the man whom God put forward as a propitiation by his blood. Behold the man for whom it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. Behold the man who humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Behold the man who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising its shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Behold the man whose one act of righteousness leads to justification and life for all men. Behold the man who gave himself for our sins to deliver us from the present evil age, according to the will of our God and Father. Behold the man in whom we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses. Behold the man, all Gentiles who were alienated from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers to the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. But now in him, you who were once far off have been brought near by his blood. Behold the man, through whom God has reconciled to himself all things, things on earth and things in heaven, making peace by his blood shed on the cross. You he has reconciled in his body of flesh by his death, in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before God. Behold the man who entered the most holy place once for all by his own blood, thus securing eternal redemption. Behold the man who appeared once for all at the end of the ages to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. Behold the man who came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Behold the man who lays down his life for the sheep and has authority to take it up again. Behold the man who died for the ungodly. Behold the man through whom God shows his love for us, and that while we were still sinners, he died for us. Behold the man through whom there is now no condemnation. Behold the man whose blood cleanses us from all sin. Behold the man through whom the love of God was made manifest. Not that we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. When you understand and see the great chasm between you and God because of your sin, behold the man. When you realize your own moralism will not get you across the chasm, behold the man. When you stumble and fall into sin, behold the man. When you feel the desires and temptations of the flesh cannot be overcome, behold the man. When you cannot forgive others, behold the man. When guilt and shame weigh you down, behold the man. If you feel you cannot escape judgment and condemnation, behold the man. If you think your sin is too great and beyond forgiveness, behold the man. If you don't feel loved by God, behold the man. If you want to see the greatest display of love, behold the man. If you want to try and comprehend the breadth and length and height and depth of God's love, behold the man. If you think God does not account for sin, behold the man. If you think God is not serious about judgment upon sin, behold the man. If you think God's justice is not carried out in full measure, behold the man. If you think what is written in the Scriptures won't be fulfilled, behold the man. If you think God is not serious about His word, behold the man. If you question how a loving God could send people to eternal hell because they reject His Son, behold the man. If you think you know or wonder what the world needs right now, it needs to behold the man. If you think you know or wonder what America needs right now, it needs to behold the man. If you think you know or wonder what the church needs right now, it needs to always behold the man. If you think you're suffering beyond what you can endure, behold the man. If you think God cannot empathize with our suffering, behold the man. When you ask why a loving God would allow so much suffering in the world, behold the man. When you feel your suffering isn't fair or undeserved, behold the man. Pilate was right about one thing. Behold the man.